A German fighter pilot saw the B-17 ahead of him, and, for 1 second, he hesitated, because this was not supposed to be just a bomber. It was a flying fortress, guns in the nose. Guns in the tail, guns in the belly, guns on the sides, guns above the fuselage. Every angle seemed covered, every approach seemed dangerous. From a distance, it looked like the aircraft had eyes in every direction and teeth in every shadow. German pilots had been told to respect it. Some feared it, some hated it. Some believed attacking it from the wrong angle was suicide. But then the B-17 ahead of him began to fall behind, one engine smoking, formation slipping away, the tight defensive box opening like a broken shield, and suddenly the German pilot understood the truth. A B-17 inside the formation was a fortress. A B-17 alone was prey. This is the brutal story of the flying fortress, the bomber that looked impossible to attack, the machine German pilots respected for its wall of fire, and the terrible secret every crew learned over Europe. The guns could protect you, the armor could help you, the formation could save you. But if your bomber fell behind, every fighter in the sky could smell blood. The B-17 Flying Fortress earned its name honestly. It was big, rugged, long-ranged, and covered with heavy machine guns. The later versions carried up to 13.50 caliber guns. To a German pilot closing through tracer fire, it could feel like even more, 16 guns, 20 guns. A whole flying wall of metal. The exact number mattered less than the impression. Everywhere he looked, there seemed to be another gunner waiting, a nose gunner, a top turret gunner, a ball turret gunner, waist gunners, a tail gunner, men sitting in freezing metal stations at high altitude, waiting for enemy fighters to come close enough to shoot. The B-17 was not fast enough to run from fighters. It was not agile enough to dodge like a fighter. It survived in a different way, by flying high, by staying tough, by keeping its crew at their guns, and most of all, by staying in formation. That formation was the real fortress, not one bomber, dozens of them, stacked high and low, left and right. Each aircraft covering blind spots for the next. A German fighter attacking one B-17 was not only facing that bomber's guns, he was flying into the fire of the bombers around it. That was the idea, a combat box, a moving fortress in the sky, a formation so dense with defensive fire that German pilots had to think carefully before diving in. But the system had one terrifying weakness. It only worked if the bomber stayed inside it, at 25,000 feet over Europe. Staying in formation was harder than it looked. The air was thin, the cold was savage, oxygen masks froze, guns jammed, engines struggled, flak burst around the formation like black flowers opening in the sky. A near miss could punch hundreds of holes into a bomber. A shell fragment could cut a fuel line, damage a control cable. Wound a gunner, diced an engine, the pilot had to hold position anyway. Too high, and he might drift into another bomber. Too low, and he could lose the protective box. Too fast, and he might overrun his place. Too slow, and the formation would leave him behind. That was the nightmare. A bomber did not need to explode to be doomed. It only needed to fall out of line. German pilots watched for that moment. They studied the bomber's stream, like wolves studying a herd. The strongest part was not always worth attacking. The weak one was, the wounded one, the smoking one, the one losing altitude, the one whose pilot was fighting damaged controls. The one whose crew had already survived flak, only to realize the worst danger was still coming. Once a B-17 dropped behind the formation, everything changed. The interlocking fire disappeared, the sky opened around it. The German fighters no longer had to fly through a wall. They could circle, choose angles, take turns, attack from above, attack from behind, attack from the nose. They could work the lone bomber until something broke. Inside the B-17, the crew knew what it meant when the formation began pulling away. At first, maybe they denied it. The pilot pushed more power. The engineer watched the gauges. The co-pilot called out airspeed. The top turret scanned for fighters. The waist gunners watched the empty sky behind them. The tail gunner sat alone at the back, staring into the one direction no crewman wanted to see fighters appear. Then the distance grew. The other fortresses became smaller. Their contrails stretched ahead. Their guns could no longer help. The lone B-17 was now on its own, and the Luftwaffe knew it. The first fighter might come fast, a Focke-Wulf or Messerschmitt sliding into position. Maybe from 6 o'clock, maybe from high behind. Maybe from the front, where German pilots had learned that a head-on pass gave the gunners less time to react. The B-17 crew opened fire, the tail guns hammered, the top turret spun. The waist guns kicked, spent casings fell and rolled across the floor. The bomber shook with recoil. For a moment, it still felt like a fortress, then the fighter flashed past. Cannon shells struck the fuselage. A window shattered, a gunner screamed. The pilot felt the controls jerk. The fighter was gone, but another was already coming. That was the terror of being alone. You could survive one pass, maybe two, maybe three, but every attack took something: a gun, an engine, a man, a piece of the aircraft you needed to get home. German pilots did not need to destroy the B-17 immediately. They could wound it, slow it, force it lower, make it easier for the next fighter. A damaged bomber falling from the combat box became more vulnerable with every minute. The crew could throw out weight, ammunition boxes, loose equipment, anything not bolted down. The pilot could try to rejoin the formation, but with one engine dead, another losing power, or controls damaged, climbing back was almost impossible. The formation was moving at mission speed. It could not slow for one aircraft. That sounds cruel, but it was survival. If the entire group slowed for one wounded bomber, more bombers would die. The formation had to keep going. So the straggler fought alone. This is where the name Flying Fortress became almost painful, because the bomber was still strong, still armed, still carrying men who refused to quit. But the fortress was never meant to stand alone against the entire sky. The real fortress was the group, the fire pattern, the discipline, the formation. Break that, and the myth cracked open. German pilots learned the lesson quickly. Do not waste everything. On the strongest point of the bomber stream, look for the gap. Look for the bomber with smoke from an engine. Look for the aircraft sliding low. Look for the crew that has already been hurt. Then attack, again and again, until the fortress falls. But this was not a story of helpless men. B-17 crews fought back with terrifying courage. A lone bomber could still be dangerous. German pilots knew that too. A tail gunner with steady hands could rip into a fighter's engine. A ball turret gunner could catch an attacker from below. Waist gunners could fill the sky with crossfire. A wounded aircraft could still kill the fighter that came too close. That is why German attacks were so violent and so calculated. They wanted to get in fast, fire hard, break away, survive the guns, then return. Every pass was a duel between nerves. The German pilot had to fly into the guns. The American gunner had to hold aim while the fighter grew larger in his sight. At closing speed, there was no time for poetry, only instinct. Lead the target, fire, correct fire again, watch for smoke, watch for fire, watch for the flash of cannon. A B-17 gunner might be 19 years old, freezing, exhausted, oxygen-starved, afraid, and still responsible for the lives of 9 other men. If he hesitated, the fighter might get the shot. If he fired too early, he wasted ammunition. If he fired too late, the shells might already be inside the bomber. That was the hidden pressure behind every defensive gun. The fortress was made of aluminum and steel. But its real defense was human nerve. The tragedy was that even courage had limits. A B-17 could absorb punishment that looked impossible. Photographs after the war made it legendary. Bombers came home with tails shredded, noses smashed, wings torn open, engines missing, hundreds of holes in the fuselage. Those stories were true, but they also created a dangerous illusion. Because for every damaged fortress that made it home, others did not. Some fell burning, some broke apart, some spun out of the sky with men trapped inside, some ditched in the channel. Some disappeared over Germany. Some were last seen falling behind the formation, still fighting. That is the part people forget. The B-17 was tough, but it was not invincible. Its guns were powerful, but they were not a magic shield. Its name was Flying Fortress. But a fortress can be surrounded, and a fortress cut off from its army can be destroyed. That is why long-range fighter escort changed everything. When American fighters could stay with the bombers deeper into Europe, the Luftwaffe's job became far more dangerous. Now German pilots hunting stragglers had to worry about P-47s, P-38s, and later P-51s. The bomber stream was no longer alone. The hunters could be hunted, and that shifted the air war. But before that escort system matured, B-17 crews had to fly through some of the most brutal skies of the war, with their own guns, their formation, and their faith in each other. The lesson of the B-17 is not that one machine was unbeatable. The lesson is more powerful than that. It is that survival came from connection. One gun was not enough. One bomber was not enough. One brave crew was not enough. But many bombers, flown in formation, with overlapping fire and disciplined crews, could push through airspace that should have been impossible. That was the real strength teamwork, at 25,000 feet, not clean, not perfect, not always enough, but necessary, and the moment one bomber lost that connection, the sky became brutally honest. A flying fortress behind the formation was still full of guns, still full of courage, still full of men fighting to live. But it no longer had the wall around it. German pilots could see the difference. The crew inside could feel it. And every mile home became a battle. That is why this story matters, because it breaks the myth and makes the truth stronger. The B-17 was not legendary because it could not be hurt. It was legendary because men climbed into it, knowing it could be hurt. They knew the odds, they knew the cold, they knew the flak. They knew German fighters waited for the weak and wounded, and they went anyway. So remember, the next time you see a B-17 in a photograph, do not just see the guns. Do not just see the name Flying Fortress. Do not just see the beautiful formation against the clouds. Look for the bomber at the edge, the one smoking, the one drifting, the one trying desperately to stay with the group. Inside are 10 men, listening to engines, oxygen, gunfire, and fear. The pilot is holding the aircraft together. The engineer is watching the gauges. The gunners are searching the sky. The radio operator is waiting for the call no one wants to make. And behind them, somewhere in the sun, German fighters are turning toward the straggler. That was the true nightmare over Europe, not the bomber that flew proudly in the middle of the box. The bomber that fell behind, because when the Flying Fortress lost the fortress around it, whole Luftwaffe knew where to look. If the B-17 crews who fought their way through those skies deserve to be remembered, hit the like button, scour for more forgotten World War II stories. Because some heroes did not fight in fast fighters, they fought in freezing bombers, behind machine guns, inside damaged aircraft, trying to keep formation, because they knew the moment they fell behind, the fortress became a target.